This is Keys to the Shop, Founder Friday edition. Today we're talking with Phil Sipka, co-founder and executive director of Kusanya Cafe. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show, and this is a Founder Friday episode. So on the last Friday of every month, we interview a founder and owner of a coffee shop that is doing great work in specialty retail. And I'm excited to talk with Phil Sipka of Kusanya Cafe in Chicago, in Englewood. This is a really great conversation about starting a coffee shop within a community that is driven by the community and residents of that neighborhood, and is a success and is contributing to the transformation of that community and not the gentrification of that community. I wanted to talk with Kusanya Cafe ever since talking with Dr. Stacy Sutton when we had her on the show to talk about gentrification. She is a big fan of their cafe and the work they are doing. So I'm really excited that we get to dive into the story of Kusanya Cafe. Now, Keys to the Shop would not be possible without the support of our great sponsors. I want to take a moment to thank them right now, starting with Prima Coffee. So Prima Coffee is a leading specialty coffee equipment supplier who curates the best equipment from around the world to fit perfectly with the needs of both their enthusiast and professional customers. Helping you make great coffee at home or in your shop is what drives them. So if you want a great home bar, or if you're opening a coffee bar and you need to outfit it with the best commercial equipment and the right commercial equipment to fit your needs, look no further than prima-coffee.com. They have expert assistance to go along with their wide range of products, and you just go to prima-coffee.com, see for yourself, email them, call them, reach out, and see how they can help you get the right gear to fit whatever situation you happen to be in. So again, that's prima-coffee.com, and my thanks to Prima for their support of Keys to the Shop. This episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista Series. The Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages is designed specifically for professional baristas and the standards for excellence that they demand. Now, whether that's almond, soy, coconut, rice, or oat milk, its ability to take the heat from steaming, produce an unmatched silky texture, and keep the flavor balance focused on the coffee, all of that makes it a perfect choice for your cafe's menu. Pacific is a huge supporter of specialty coffee worldwide in the barista community. These products are just a great testimony to that fact. And I would encourage you to go to pacificfoods.com to learn more about the Barista Series line of plant-based performance beverages and see how they can elevate the non-dairy offerings that you give to your customers in your cafe. And my thanks to Pacific for their support of Keys to the Shop. All right, so today we are going to be talking with Phil Sipka, the co-founder and current executive director of Kusanya Cafe. Phil began his work in powerful forgotten spaces in 2002 when he volunteered for a year on Atlanta's west side. He then moved to Navajo Reservation in Arizona, where he was actively involved with youth and community events while working as a high school teacher. After 2 years, he traveled to Los Angeles, where he continued his work in the nonprofit field and received a Master's of Arts in Theology from Fuller Theological Seminary. Phil then moved to Englewood, where he has lived for the past 10 years. Over that period, he has joined in the efforts of the Englewood activists already present within the community. Phil was a founding member of the Resident Association of Greater Englewood and served as a local representative for increasing bike access for the southwest region of Chicago. And he co-founded and is the current executive director of Kusanya Cafe, which is an all-resident-run nonprofit coffee shop in Englewood. The story of how this came to be, the trials and challenges that Phil and the board and the community that he worked with to bring this to fruition is a harrowing one and a frustrating one when you look at things that are stacked up against development of things like a cafe for a community like Englewood. We go into the story of how Phil got into this line of work, and we spend a lot of time going through the story of founding Kusanya Cafe, which is now a little over 5 years in successful operation. Kusanya Cafe is just a true community space run by all residents in Englewood and is producing amazing food and quality coffee drinks for the community. So like I said in the beginning of this show, this cafe came highly recommended by respected scholar and past guest on the show talking about gentrification, Dr. Stacy Sutton. And after hearing the story of its founding and operation and the values that drive it, I think you'll definitely be inspired, because this cafe really serves as a model for operators of being truly infused with the neighborhood and serving the needs of the neighborhood without forcing a concept on people that is just selfishly motivated. So this is really a needed conversation, and I hope that you enjoy it and get a lot out of it. I surely did. And next time I'm in Chicago, I'm definitely making a beeline to go to Kusanya Cafe. So here now is my conversation with the executive director and co-founder of Kusanya Cafe, Phil Sipka. All right, Phil, welcome to Keys to the Shop. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yes, it's going to be great.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of great things about you and the work you're doing over at Kusanya. The past guest on the show who was talking about gentrification with us, Stacy Sutton, she is a customer of yours and was raving about you on the show, and I'm really glad to kind of dive into your story a little bit more officially on this episode.
Definitely. We're excited about it. So that'll be good.
So I want to dive into a little bit about your background coming into coffee. You are coming from a background in nonprofit work, and then you kind of parlayed that into the coffee field and what you're doing now. How did this all happen for you?
Well, it happened in a myriad of different ways, I guess. I had been working in a lot of different nonprofit spheres, everything from teen detention facilities to teaching to work in an after-school program. But I guess the main way is I was moved to Englewood probably 11 years ago now and started working in an after-school program here. And just after living and working in the neighborhood, we kind of started organizing a little bit around our community, just kind of doing some community organizing and realizing the need for that third space in our community. Englewood at that time didn't really have any sit-down restaurant type places for 65,000 residents. So we would have to go to another neighborhood to meet about our own community. And so I had worked in coffee a little bit, not too much, probably about 3 years worth of experience. We really thought that it would really be a great mechanism for bringing our neighbors together and bringing the diverse cross-sections of people within our neighborhood together. So I guess that's the short answer to your question.
So you have some background in coffee as a barista?
Yes. Yep. Definitely.
Okay,
so
cool.
I had worked as a barista in Pasadena, California, where I was in grad school for a little while. And I had always been going to shops, and I had loved watching all the different things that could kind of get pulled together within that very flexible sphere. I mean, coffee seems to be that one medium where you can do so much. It'd be, having an art show in a restaurant doesn't really work as much. Concerts don't happen as much, but coffee, it seems to be that flexible medium where so many different things can happen. And I think observing that and working in that excited me for the possibilities of what that could be for us in our neighborhood.
Absolutely, yeah. The third space concept of coffee bars, just like, barber shops, or, people use a Waffle House sometimes, or depending on if you're in the Midwest, like a Shoney's or something like that, as a third place when they can't find one, and we need those in society. So it's awesome that you're providing that for your community. And it's such a crazy thing that you had to go outside of your neighborhood to find a place to meet about your community. You mentioned the group of people you were meeting with. Who are these folks? So who is on the team of Kusanya that kind of got this thing rolling?
Well, primarily it was just my neighbors, to be honest with you. We were just talking kind of as a group. It was started with just people on my block. as we were talking. And then also just a few civically active people that are in the neighborhood that I just met through different circles. I think one of the things that I love about a neighborhood like mine is there are some of the most caring, loving, and heroic people that are just sold out for their neighborhood. And I think that's one of the things that's mostly overlooked in neighborhoods like Englewood, that people don't think about is there are just fighters and advocates for the neighborhood like I haven't seen in neighborhoods that have been super developed. And I think that's where a lot of some of the positive, I think, backlash sometimes comes. That I even heard in Dr. Sutton's podcast where you guys were talking, because there are those people that have been fighting for so long and they are so invested and they do care what comes into their neighborhoods. So those people are all around. And so I think we just kind of started locking arms and saying, all right, like, will this work? Could this be something that our neighborhood needs? And so we started the very long process of searching for space and getting open and getting all the things together that we needed, and definitely proved to be much more difficult than we could have ever imagined.
Well, what was the most difficult thing about this?
Finding space, really. That was something that we didn't think would be a very difficult barrier. Englewood doesn't have a lot of leasable commercial space to begin with, but with the amount of vacant commercial that we do have, we thought that people would be elated when we walked up to them and said, hey, we would love to rent this commercial space that you've had sitting dormant for 10 years. And that was not the case. So we probably went through 4 or 5 different spaces, encountered a lot of probably unique problems unique to our neighborhood. Was that a lot of investors had bought into spaces and stuff like that, and they had no intention of building it out to like a vanilla box status, so that we could rent it. They saw it as very risky for themselves to invest $20,000, $30,000 in the space for a tenant that probably would last a year or less.
So they're looking for like a bigger company to come through, like a chain or something. Bigger
companies. I mean, people, and I think there's a lot of freedom. I think to some extent, neighborhoods like Englewood are kind of like the wild, wild west, meaning if you want to create something, you can create it here and it's great. But that also has attracts a lot of, what's a great word for that?
Vultures?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think people that are really just trying to feed off of that easy access to the things and have zero investment, zero desire to make it better. They're just trying to make short financial gains. And around the time we started looking was right around the time the Olympics were were possibly coming to the area. And we saw, my theory is that a lot of people bought up property in with the idea of potentially just reselling it very quickly. And that obviously didn't happen. And then the market crashed. It had crashed only about 6 months to a year before, and people then were underwater in these buildings. They had no intention of finishing them out. And in some of the properties we even had to, I think one of the properties we had been in 6 months lease negotiations. We had gotten all these things together, and then the week we were supposed to sign, they had signed a lease with a storefront church that just had the money right then.
Oh no!
And we were like, "Oh, you got to be kidding me!" So it took us probably 3 years in all just to find space. We had raised money, we've done fundraisers, we had done all these different things, and we had the money ready. We were ready to go, and we didn't have any takers. It was really hard.
So this isn't just looking for space and not getting it; it's having a space, being in it, and having to move.
We didn't actually ever possess them. No, we would literally have, like, we'd be in talks forever. It's like, okay, we'd love to rent this space. And they'd say, wow, yeah, that's definitely a possibility. And, try calling back later. We'd walk through, we'd talk. We'd even got to some points, like the one I just told you, where we literally had a full lease written out. We had passed it over back and forth a couple times, dotted I's, crossed the T's, and then still didn't go through just because of quick money, guaranteed money, that kind of thing. Yeah, it was kind of crazy. So we literally like just had to keep going. And there's two boards that served 2 full year terms before we ever even opened. And those were frustrating times. Those were really hard. I give a lot of accolades to our board members who trudged through some very thin years of just bad news throughout.
So what was the breakthrough moment? When did this turn around? The space that you have now, you discovered it. How did you come to it, and what steps did you take after that?
Well, we finally found this space, which ironically was our long-term vision space. It had sat vacant and it needed extensive rehab. Nobody was in it at all, and we couldn't afford to do it. But we did. There's a much longer story that goes along with it, but the short story is that one of our board members finally decided to step in and purchase the building, and that, I think, really just saved the day. And without her investment in the building, we probably would never. It probably wouldn't be in existence this day. But that allowed us the freedom to kind of move forward and keep going.
That's awesome. And at the same time, without that, it would be, like you said, impossible. That's frustrating that it would be that hard to start something, even though that so many people want to do it. But it seems like circumstances were just kind of pushing back so hard.
Yeah, and I think I think a lot of times, especially for neighborhoods like ours, the neighborhood ends up getting faulted for the lack of development. And I think as we did this, as we kind of got in deeper into this process of working on this cafe, we realized how many systematic, kind of almost oppressive measures keeps development from happening in this area. So, for example, like banks don't believe in commercial in this area. They don't believe it's a worthwhile investment. So therefore, there's almost no access to capital. It's very hard. I mean, they won't give you capital until you've been in business 2 years, but you can't get into business without capital to start it.
It's a catch-22.
Yeah, and then there's, with very low controlling of assets, without the control of the buildings, then you can't start anything. And so if a lot of people from outside the neighborhood own buildings, but then have a very low view of the neighborhood, well, then they don't believe in commercial either. There's just a lot of steps. Along with city disinvestment in cities, like the city, meanwhile, in that 5 years destroyed, I don't know how many commercial buildings that were vacant, but destroying the infrastructure also means that we're never going to be able to afford to build a building from the ground up. That's a humongous obstacle. So we only could rehab. So, all those things are really, those are things that are factors and forces from outside the neighborhood really affecting the day-to-day life inside the neighborhood.
And so the city itself and policies that are in place, this is something that I know Dr. Sutton had talked about, land use policy and changing laws and systems to allow for that type of growth. You kind of wandered into the worst of it in this, but you've been open 5 years now, and congratulations, by the way. I think it was, November of 2013, you opened to this cafe, right?
Yep.
And I imagine a lot has changed since then. Maybe the conversation about whether or not retail or commercial can work in that area has changed a bit.
Yeah, I think we just met as a board a couple months ago. We were kind of just rehashing our story amongst ourselves, and it's so easy to forget how hard or how kind of different we were when we first opened. Now it seems kind of normal. But I remember when we first opened, and some of our really well-meaning and caring neighbors said, "There's no way you can open this place without bars on these windows. Like, you will get broken into every single night." And it was out of a place of caring. And some people were like, "Oh, you need to buzz people in. You can't just leave that door open. You don't know who's going to wander into the cafe." And we made a conscious choice. And I think, in line with what Dr. Sutton was talking about in terms of, I believe she used the term revitalization. in terms of, as opposed to gentrification.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were residents, because we lived here, I think we know the character of our neighbors, and there's a really high character of if something is coming from the neighborhood and it seems to be something that's good or something that has hints of altruism in it, like there is a loyalty and almost a protection that comes from that, and we kind of trusted that. We trusted that that kind of ethical code that we saw in our neighbors, and boy, I'm so glad we did. Like looking at it now, we have had almost zero problems. In fact, I think we are probably more protected than any cafe in the city of Chicago, I would assume. And it's the kind of neighborhood protection, meaning that our neighbors are looking out for us, and watching out for us in a way that I don't know that happens in other neighborhoods as much. I don't know. I've never opened a coffee shop in another neighborhood, but I sure appreciate what our neighbors have done. But yeah, I think that was a different thing, and a lot of people weren't sure. Like, will people buy gourmet coffee in Englewood? Is that something that they want? And I think since the very beginning, we knew that that was not a felt need in our community. People weren't going, all right, top 5 priorities for Englewood. What do we need? Gourmet coffee was not up high on the list, I'm sure. But it was something we knew that the gathering space was, or it might not have even been something that people would have expressed just outwardly. But I think we all knew the power that it could bring. And so the big question was, could we attract the different diverse cross sections of the neighborhood that exist? Englewood is very monolithic when it comes to race, but it's very diverse when it comes to economics and education and social capital. We knew that it'd be really easy to grab, middle class residents in the neighborhood because they go to coffee all the time. They just went to different neighborhoods to get it. But could we grab people that aren't familiar with this model, familiar with just kind of going to a coffee shop as a day-to-day ritual? Can we get those people? Because the whole mission behind it was, if we can just gather Englewood residents together, that kind of empowerment would naturally occur. People will just start sharing resources. I think we as humans are naturally generous creatures with people that we know and people that we see face to face. But can we get this diverse cross section to come together? And once they do, we believe that empowerment will kind of occur naturally and organically without having to say, hey, you sit down next to this person and share what you got, that will just kind of naturally happen organically. And I think we've seen that to a certain extent, which has been, that was the biggest X factor in what we were doing. And I'm so happy to be kind of looking at it 5 years in now and seeing that. So.
That's amazing. And having started organically and being of the neighborhood, all of those things in your favor, it seems like that has done wonders for building trust with your community. And at the same time, coffee shops going into lower income neighborhoods are what I said in that episode with Dr. Sutton, a harbinger of gentrification. In spite of the origins of this idea, were there any worries that you had to allay about that when the idea of opening a coffee shop in this neighborhood, were people worried that it was just going to attract predatory landlords and chain coffee shops and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, gentrification is always something that I definitely have at the forefront of my mind naturally. From our perspective, I mean, and I'll preface whatever I say by this is my major push and what I'm always going to advocate for is for the most vulnerable people in my neighborhood. They are my people. They are who I'm fighting for and wanting ultimately what's best for. With all that being said, I don't believe gentrification is a worry for Englewood. Just because we we have a litany of issues that, which I don't believe the middle class will find attractive for some time.
Okay.
And I see all the positives, so I think it's a wonderful neighborhood. But in terms of the mass exodus of middle class residents seeing value in it, I don't think they're going to have the eyes to see value in it for a while. So my major push is to hopefully get our neighbors to enjoy what we have without having to worry that it's always going to bring negative things. And I think that was one of the reasons why we were a nonprofit from the very beginning, because we don't gain a lot of benefits from being a nonprofit at all, really. We still have to we pay all the taxes and everything like that. We don't get taxed on our profits, but then again, we don't make a profit. So getting the federal government to not tax us on profits doesn't really mean anything to us. But the main purpose, though, was to say, nobody owns this place. Nobody's financially benefiting off this place. This place is run and possessed by Englewood residents. It's a lot of extra work during tax season to go through the nonprofit paperwork as opposed to the regular profit paperwork. But to us, it's worth it to be able to say that, because this change has been tough for our neighborhood. And I think I'm very sympathetic to people who worry about change, because when all the changes that have happened in your neighborhood have kind of been bad changes for a long time, just to begin to start asking your neighbors to go, oh, but be excited about this change. This is a good one. Trust me. That's a big ask. So I guess I hope that's answered your question.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I guess my next question is, how do you maintain that trust? How do you run the shop on a day-to-day basis that keeps it being a co-created space with the community, to be a gathering place? What are structures that you have in place to make sure that it functions in those ways?
Oh, well, that's a great question. There's a bunch of things we do. First off, we try to hire exclusively from the neighborhood. That's a very important thing. Second of all, you can say that you want a diverse cross-section of people, but if you don't price things so that different cross-sections can afford things, then your words mean nothing. So we have a lot of things priced very low so that everybody can kind of come and be able to afford that. So we tried to be really creative. It makes it tougher. It means we need to sell a lot more to kind of make the same amount of revenue that a normal coffee shop would be. But I think for us to accomplish our mission, that had to be something that we had to do in deed and not just word, Another thing is having community-run events. So nearly all of our events are run by community members. People that come to me and say, hey, or come to the board and say, hey, I really have this cool idea to do this art thing that we're going to do, And so I really feel like my job is just to say yes to things, and let the neighborhood in some ways dictate kind of what this shop becomes. The hard part I realized about kind of empowerment is that you have to give up power to empower. And I think that's probably one of the things that's the hardest for us to do, just as humans. We want everybody to gain power, but we don't want to give up any of the power that we currently have. So
True.
I want you to have all the decision-making power, but I still want to have decision-making power. Well, it doesn't happen that way. Like, you've got to give up some of that control to give control over to your neighbors. And I think we've been rewarded greatly by giving up control of some things. And so, like, for example, with the events, I think when we started out, I said, I think we're probably going to have a big open mic night and big scenes, and maybe we'll do some poetry slams and stuff like that. And ironically enough, that has not materialized. We've become more of a storytelling and yoga place. And I said, I would have never predicted that. But those just came from residents saying, hey, I would like to start a community yoga night. Okay, go ahead. And it's kind of led by those organizations or those people. I had another person said, yeah, we want to do an open mic storytelling night. Is that something that you'd be up for? Sure, go ahead. letting things develop organically like that has also been something that's been huge, I think, in terms of developing trust and allowing Englewood to put its stamp on this place. So, I think it's been a big thing for us.
So it seems like opening up the store to incubate other people's ideas has really gone a long way to build trust, and probably a lot of word of mouth advertising for the store, generating traffic, things like that.
Oh, definitely. I think with that was one of the things that I think that was probably surprising for us, is that word of mouth is really the only way that we get new people to come in to a large extent. We've had such great press. People have been so kind to us. We've been, on, local TV and national TV and in newspapers, Chicago Tribune and the Sun Times. And that never really seems to bring more people in, to be honest with you. But whenever I ask people, and I always ask people every single time I see a new face in here, I say, "Oh, how did you hear about us?" It's a lot of people just say, "Oh, I had this friend at work tell me I gotta come down, and they said I gotta try the oatmeal, so I'm coming down to try the oatmeal,
Nice.
And that's something that I think we experience in the neighborhood a little different than maybe other shops or other neighborhoods would experience. Is there's a little bit more of a cautiousness of trying these new things because it's unfamiliar, and I think that's just a human nature thing. That has nothing particular to Englewood. I always tell people, like, if there's some French restaurant downtown, it may have the best food, but to some extent, I'm kind of worried if I walk in there and I don't know anybody that's ever been in there before. Am I going to be able to understand the menu? It's written in a different language. Am I going to be able to afford it? I don't want to walk in there, sit down, not understand the menu, not be able to afford it, and then have to embarrassingly walk out. I just might go to something I'm more familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get that. And I think our job is to make people feel really comfortable when they do come in. But word of mouth is the main way. Definitely, hands down.
Speaking of menus, what is it that you determined to be your menu? How did you decide on what to serve in the shop as far as beverages and food and all of that? Can you just give us a description of what you could expect to find when you come into Kusanya?
When you come into the cafe, we do breakfast and lunch all day. And so again, like I said, we had to be creative in terms of making food that we also wanted to offer something that was fresh and not, an alternative to fast food. So we decided to make a lot of things ourselves, from different sauces that we put on sandwiches to our own like salad dressings and stuff like that, and do like fresh cracked eggs for our breakfast sandwiches and things like that. For a couple reasons. A, it's better. B, it's a little more cost effective for us, and and hopefully it'll also be good, just taste better for people. And so, but we also wanted to do something too that would be something familiar to people, and then also maybe just take it a little step farther, so it's just a little different and it's got its own little flavor. And so, we do a breakfast sandwich that you can build yourself. We do this baked oatmeal that I was really surprised. I did it as a side project, and it became something that we're known for, which is really funny. I would have never called it. I had seen something like this somewhere else, and I just thought, this is a cute thing. I'll try this, and develop the recipe on it, and then and now it's one of our most popular things. Again, sometimes you never know what you could put on the menu that people will really gravitate towards. We just do kind of traditional fare for coffee shops: salads, soups, sandwiches. But we also kind of like to name them with our own flair and own inside jokes. And I think that was another way to kind of build loyalty in the neighborhood. So our breakfast sandwich is called the Lupe Tabasco, in honor of Lupe Fiasco, who is a Chicago hip hop artist. And we have other names like the Tuna Turner and the Chicken Funkadelic and the Big Payback, all kind of little homages to people that a lot of our neighbors are familiar with, and they can get the inside joke, and it's really funny to see people from outside the neighborhood come and not necessarily understand what we're doing.
Get it.
But I think that was one thing, and that was another little thing on the side that I thought, this will be just fun. We'll, when the boards talk about what to do, and this will be fun, and I was really surprised at how much people really took to that and appreciated it and said, "Oh, okay, like this place is cool. Like they're cool here." And I think having that, it was what built loyalty, I guess, and I think that's the thing to go back to your other question too, is just like everything from the art on the walls to the music that you play says how you enter a neighborhood. Do you enter the neighborhood with some knowledge? Are you kind of entering respecting the culture that's there, or are you just kind of saying, this is the culture that I like, and I'm imposing it right in the middle of this neighborhood and like it,
Right.
All those things kind of either smack of colonialism or they smack of revitalization and care and thoughtfulness, I think. So,
it seems like what you're doing and playing the long game of revitalization, but just by showing up every day and building with the community is one of the surest ways to revitalization. Instead of just trying to snap your fingers and make something happen immediately, it sounds like it takes a lot of just work and dedication, mutual dedication, one to another.
Yeah. Oh, it is very not sexy in the day-to-day. I'll tell you that. I think it is very slow. And I think, people go, how's the cafe doing? Is it just transforming? They go, oh, it's not transforming anything, but slowly but surely, I think it's the people that come in and connect themselves in there, where, it is very small bits and pieces, but it's beautiful in its own way, and I think, I'm happy with that. We still struggle on a day-to-day to make payroll, and some days are slower than others, and I get nervous. But overall, I think I am super encouraged just by the people that come in and make that their home, and make that part of their place and part of their day, and also the kids that come by, and I like that kids come by after school and they see a place like this in their neighborhood, and I think it's important for people viewing a neighborhood and viewing it as a beautiful place that it is. But yeah, I think we try to be a place, and I think that's another thing too. To be honest with you, is viewing what resource you are, and I think sometimes we think our skill would be, we're making coffee and food. That's what we bring to the table in Englewood. And I think it's actually not. It took us a few years to realize that it's not the food and the drinks, although that's really important to us that it's really good. But we are space, space is our great asset, and we're trying to use that really, really well. So
when you talk about changing people's lives based on their interactions with your business, I mean, that's something that I love about the coffee industry itself, watching families grow up from behind the bar, and knowing that even staff, having staff come in, they, work maybe a year, 2 years, sometimes more, sometimes less, but they can be impacted greatly just by the time that they've spent working in the midst of something that's a great fit for them and great fit for their community. And staff tend to really be impacted by their space because they see it so often and they take ownership over it. And how do you manage the staff at the cafe? How do you empower them and coach them and bring them up in their experience of Kusanya? Because it's unique. The customer experience is one thing, but then the staff experience is another.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I think it's been hard for me. I don't think of myself as a natural manager. I don't feel that I'm very good at it. I feel like I'm a really good barista in mediocre manager. But I'm continually trying to figure out new ways of being better at that. And one of the things the board and I developed was kind of this big checklist where when some new staff come on, and one of the first things we do is I always hire somebody on for a month, and I said, you get a trial month. That's what I'm guaranteeing you. And then after that month, your fellow staff member is going to vote on whether or not to accept you onto the team long term. And that was one of the things I instituted that, again, was kind of giving up power, right? Like, I really want to have the ability to like say yes or no to this. But the staff made such a great job. That kind of power to choose your own teammates has been really good.
And it's worked out in the cafe.
Yeah. And I think I have no regrets about that decision. And they've always made a really good, you're always worried like, oh man, are they going to be petty? Are they going to like just kind of go, I don't like that person's personality? But that has never happened. People are always making very wise, nuanced decisions. I always have staff come in and talk to me about, all right, like, what do you think? What do you think the strengths are? What do you think they need to work on? And what is your vote? Do you think they're good to bring on the team? And they've always made good decisions. Another thing we do is this big checklist that I give every staff member at the very beginning is it's got every expectation that I will ever have of you written out in a kind of very objective form. Everything broken down from efficiency to drink making to food making to customer service to personal skills like coming on time and taking responsibility for shifts. And I got it broken down into 3 categories: competence, independence, and mastery. And once you're able to check off every checkbox for competence, then you get a pay raise, you get access to more hours, and more responsibilities. And then once you check off all the boxes for competence, then you can get a pay raise, and it has nothing to do whether or not there is somebody up ahead of you or not. So the whole point was, you do these pre-agreed upon things. It has nothing to do with my feelings about you on a given week or month, whether or not you get a raise. It's based on actual pre-agreed upon things. And I found that, it's probably the most empowering thing that I could do is to give you kind of the keys to the kingdom, and they don't change,
Right.
And I try to meet with my staff once every 2 months, and we just kind of go through the list and say, yeah, what are you thinking about this? This is kind of where I've graded you. And usually we don't have any like arguments. Like, yep, that's exactly where it's at. Yep, that's where it's at. And it is a nice point to kind of go, hey, you just start doing this one thing, like we can get you a raise here. And it makes me more their advocate than just the person who kind of comes down on them to a certain extent. But the whole goal is, I said, hey, it's it'd be great for me if everybody was a master. Like I don't need one manager. I don't want everybody to be masterful. That'd be great. So we'll pay everybody masters level wages if we can. So some people take to it and some people don't. It's not a fireproof thing, but it's something that we've tried to put in place to kind of be an empowering thing.
Is the reverse true in terms of if somebody's not working out? Is it a group decision in that case as well?
Not for the actual letting go. Past that first month, it's kind of more on me. I think most people don't really. I think that's too much to put on staff members, to be honest with you. It's really hard. I think that's something that the manager has to kind of just bite the bullet on and make that decision, because to ask staff to kind of fire their coworker is a lot, I think. And so that's where I got to do the parental duties. And they're not getting paid enough to have to fire people, I think. So I do that.
Right.
But it's a tough decision. But I did have one other coworker, or not a coworker, a friend of mine who manages other people. Probably give me the best advice that I ever given. And she told me, she goes, I think that it's my duty to help people understand when it's their time to leave, because people don't automatically know And she says, so I just ask people like, hey, it seems like you just don't want to be here anymore. Is that true? Because I want to let you know that it's totally okay. Like the opportunity to give somebody permission to leave. Because I think sometimes we as workers think that we're doing somebody a favor by sticking around, even when we don't want to be there, and it's not a favor.
Right.
And actually just kind of giving that meeting time to give permission for people to leave has been probably one of the best things that I've done. That's probably one of the best advice that has ever given to me, is kind of going, it just seems like you're not into it anymore. And a lot of times you're like, yeah, I'm just not into it anymore. I'm like, hey, that's totally cool. That's fine. Like that's all right. Like, cause we just want to have people that are wanting to be here, and that's all right. And sometimes that giving that permission means I don't have to fire very many people at all,
Right. And it kind of harkens back to being their advocate. Even in that situation, you're still advocating for their benefit.
I don't want to force you by guilt to be here. Like it's okay. Like, yeah, I'm on your side. Like, I don't want you to be working a job that you don't like, and to be honest, it's not helping our team as well. Like when you're here and kind of not into it, so that's fine. Yeah. It's a mutually beneficial thing. Exactly.
So this is all sounding a lot like servant leadership, and a lot like just putting your will and your desires in open hand to the staff and the community. So it seems like a very consistent approach to the cafe, which is outstanding. And it's funny that you had mentioned talking about how staff would vote on who to bring on. There might be the worry of, are they going to be petty? It's interesting because I find that a lot of owners can tend to be the most petty of all.
It's very true.
About who they bring on, and about giving people raises, and there's nepotism in so many cafes, and putting it in the kind of framework that you are doing, it kind of clears a lot of those fears out. So it's outstanding. Well done.
Oh, well, I wish I could take credit for it all. I have a lot of help from board members and wonderful friends who I'm continually asking them, like, hey, I need some help because I'm really not that great at this right now. But yeah, I think
we should say that all a little bit more, no matter who we are, I guess.
Yeah.
We're never really going to be perfect. We always need somebody to help us see our blind spots.
Oh, it's true. If you ask my staff right now, they could probably tell you of a bunch of blind spots I got.
Oh, yeah. So thinking about what you've experienced over the last 5 years and getting this cafe started and running it and building community through it, what would your advice be to people wanting to better their communities through starting a coffee shop? People who want to own a business, own a coffee shop, and are inspired by what you're saying. What would your advice be to them?
Well, first, you better work in coffee first. I think we're probably one of the most, in some ways, kind of the most disrespected of businesses, in that people with zero experience are always wanting to do it as a hobby. And I go, oh boy, this isn't a hobby. This is your life for 10 years, at least. To truly empower, you're going to have to give up some power. And I think that's really hard. You to be passionate, to be super passionate about your ideas and your vision, but hold it loosely. Meaning that you'll allow it to change with people. And I think if you hold on to that vision so tightly that you won't let your own neighbors and your constituency change it to a certain extent, I think that's a bad thing. And I don't change things just based off of what people ask for. People come in all the time and say, you got burgers here? You got fries? I'm like, no, we don't got burgers and fries. Like, we're not going to serve burgers and fries here. Like so I'm not going to take everybody's advice all the time. I think I do have, and the board has, we have a specific vision for what that is, but for as many things as we can allow flexibility on, we are, but another thing, especially for coffee shops and stuff like that, they're in more disinvested neighborhoods. like Englewood, I'd say figure out ways of diversifying, because you are not going to get the customer traffic probably that you need just off of coffee. One thing I learned is that we do need to have food. We can't just make it as an espresso bar. That's just not going to work. But doing that, we also moved into coffee roasting ourselves. So we were a roaster, and that helps take a lot of cost pressure off of our brewed coffee, so we can keep it really cheap. But also selling bulk coffee to, grocery stores and stuff like that. That helps. And then we also open up the space for rental, so I like to say we've had everything from baby showers to wakes and repasses for people. So from birth to death, we've rented out the space, and that also lends itself to making people feel like it is their place. It's their home. It's the place where they have memories of birthdays and prom send-offs and different things like that they can mark passage in their own lives. But at the same time, helps us keep the lights on.
So what are the next 5 years going to hold for Kusanya?
Well, if I'm true to my word, I don't know yet. It depends on what our neighbors do with stuff.
Well
to be honest
said.
with you, how do they make it? But with our vision and what the board has put together, we're creating a new space that the neighborhood can kind of do with as it pleases. We just purchased a large plot of land on the same block as the cafe, and we're interested in making that into kind of a community garden / concert park for our neighbors. And so
Sweet.
It's just another space. But then again, we're just going to kind of open it up and let people use it how they will. We'll see what happens with it. Again, it's probably going to be much like the cafe and be really different than what we initially planned. But our job is just to create beautiful space and then give it away. I always give the analogy of we're kind of like canvas makers. We're not the actual artists that paint on it. Our job is to make a really good looking canvas, and then let the community paint on it what it wants. We're going to have rentable garden plots on there, a big stage for concerts. And then we have a shipping container that we've kind of made into a little pop-up shop that people can kind of rent out to either sell their vegetables or do whatever they want to do. But thinking, how can we move Kusanya, which is kind of the gathering place, into an outdoor space now? We gather people together indoors now. How can we gather people outdoors? But
exciting.
I don't know. I'm excited about looking back in 5 years and seeing what it looks like, because I think the 5 year ago Phil would be surprised with how things have turned out.
I love hearing that the vision is just consistent with what you were talking about, just being consistent with letting it be open to interpretation. And I love what you said about the canvas, making a great canvas for people to paint on. I think if a lot of us in coffee would do that, if more people in coffee would do that with their spaces, we would see an increase in not only just traffic to our stores, but satisfaction in our work as baristas or as owners and managers, because it touches on this deep thing within us that community speaks to, and to feed community like that is really great. How can we stay in touch with what you're doing online? How can we get in touch with Kusanya?
Oh, well, yeah. Our website is kusanyacafe.org. So you feel free to visit that. Our Facebook, I think we're the only Kusanya Cafe in the world. So you can, if you just type that into Facebook, we'll pop right up. And we has a list of all the events and different things that we do. And I believe, I'm not a very technologically inclined, but we also have a Instagram as well. It's Kusanya Cafe as well. But we come check us out. If you're in the area, come visit. Meet some of my awesome neighbors. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Phil, for taking the time today to talk to me. This is I use the word inspirational because it's part of what we try to do on the show, is offer people some inspiration, and sometimes it goes deeper than that. I think example that you have with working with your neighbors in your community to build something that revitalizes and nourishes them is really fantastic and definitely inspirational. So I appreciate what you do, and thank you for what you do and for being on the show.
Oh, thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
So one of the things in this conversation that I found really fantastic is the idea of giving away power and authority to those around you to create what will be in the future. Now, a lot of us have goals and a lot of us have vision for what something can be or should be, and we have a real tight grip on that. But the discipline that Phil exercises and those on his team exercise is that of collective ownership and collective decision-making, down to involving the staff with the hiring process and letting the community determine what kind of takes shape in this space. And this is, if you remember the book recommendation episode about third places and how they function as this glue that joins a community together, this talk with Phil has really made Kusanya Cafe, in my mind, a real great example of that. And it's something that a lot of us with our desire to create these beautiful bars that impress our friends on Instagram and impress our selves in what we know about coffee, how often are we sitting down to truly think about, are we serving the needs of our neighbors? And when you are eyeballing a location that's in a lower income neighborhood that needs a great third space or has existing spaces that offer things that the community needs, are you studying what those are? Are you a part of a community yourself? Are you there to serve them, or are you there to serve yourself? These are great questions to ask, and I'm glad for the example of Kusanya Cafe, and I hope for another great 5 years of success of their model in Englewood. So thank you very much, Phil, for taking time to chat with me on the show. I appreciate all that you and your team do at Kusanya Cafe. And thank you, Dr. Sutton, for the recommendation as well. I would also encourage you to check out their website, kusanyacafe.org. It's Kusanya, Kusanya Cafe.org, and see what they have going on. They always have great events, and you find their hours when you're in town. Like I said, check them out. So if you want the show notes for this episode, you can go to keystotheshop.com. On the sidebar, there's a place to put your email address, and you'll be signed up to receive the show notes in your inbox every other week. And those will just be the key takeaways and points made in each episode, along with links to the resources mentioned by myself or the guests on the show. And that's really helpful, kind of the cliff notes. There's also the ability in those notes to download the full transcript of the interview. So keystotheshop.com and sign up there. Now, if you want to reach out to me, it's chris@keystotheshop.com, and you can ask me questions, give me feedback about the show, or we can set up a call and talk about how Keys to the Shop Consulting can help you in your operation bring things to the next level with your people, quality, and the operations of your shop. So chris@keystotheshop.com. So that's it for today's show. My desire is that this conversation with Phil was eye-opening, inspirational, and gave you some great ideas about how to serve your community with your cafe. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.